Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Yuliarini. Today I'm going to present my proposal. The title is The Impact of Patriarchal Oppression on Women's Resistance in the Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. First, the background of the research. In the Yellow Wallpaper, Charlotte Perkins Gilman tells the story of a woman suffering from postpartum depression, confined by her husband, John, to a room as a part of a rest cure that worsens her conditions. As she becomes obsessed with the yellow wallpaper, she imagines a woman trapped inside it, symbolizing her own mental breakdown and perceived liberation. So, The Yellow Wallpaper is a short story written by Charlotte Perkins Gilman that was first published in 1892. The story is set in 19th century and it talks about a woman who is trapped inside a room covered by yellow wallpaper surrounding her that progressively drives her mad from being inside of it for too long. In the story, the woman is being put in a bedroom by his husband John, who is a physician, because he thought his wife is suffering from postpartum depression, which he thinks is an illness, and diagnosed her with temporary nervous depression or slight hysterical tendency after her first childbirth. As a treatment for her condition, John forbids her from doing anything like writing or engaging in any creativity or mentally stimulating activities and puts her inside the room, which is called the rest cure because he believes the rest will cure her. However, his medical methods are not helping his wife and it only makes her condition worse as day goes by. The story focuses on the oppressive nature of the medical practices of the time, back in the 19th century, particularly the rest cure, which was commonly prescribed to women diagnosed with hysteria or other forms of mental illness. In the Yellow Wallpaper, Charlotte Perkins Gilman explores the oppressive marriage and treatment of a woman suffering from postpartum depression, drawing her own experience with the rest cure to critique the 19th century gender roles and advocate for women's intellectual independence. So, this story basically tells about a woman who is suffering from a postpartum depression, and her husband, which is a physician called John, is he's trapped her inside a room that is covered, surrounded by yellow wallpaper with a woman drowned in it. And as the days goes by, she begins to have some kind of hallucinations about the woman inside the wallpaper, and she tries to free the woman inside the wallpaper by tearing it down, which is symbolized her her own freedom because she wanted to be free from the oppression of her husband. The I In this proposal I have three research questions. The first one is, how is the woman's resistance reflected in the yellow wallpaper? The second one is, how does women's resistance help liberate women from patriarchal oppressions? And the third one is, what are the impacts of patriarchal oppression reflected in the yellow wallpaper? Next. The research objectives are first. The research objectives. The proposed research aims to explore the representation of patriarchal oppressions in the yellow wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman through various symbols and narrative elements. The specific objects of this research are first, to analyze how women's resistance is reflected in the yellow wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. The second is to examine how women's resistance contributes to liberating women from patriarchal oppression. And the third one is to explore the impacts of patriarchal oppression as depicted in the yellow wallpaper. Next. The significance of the research. Here I have it parted into two. The first one is theoretical significance and the second one is practical significance. The proposed research aims to explore the impact of patriarchal oppressions on women's resistance as depicted in the yellow wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This study aims to demonstrate how women's resistance develops and how it can serve as a tool for liberation from oppressive structures. There are two significance of the research. Here are those. The first one is theoretical significance. First one is the role of literature in portraying women's mental and emotional struggles. Second one is resistance as a recurring themes in feminist literature, and the third one is the impacts of patriarchal dominance as reflected through Charles Perkins Gilman's work. And the second one is practical significance. There is that this research could be used as a resource in academic settings such as university courses or literature, feminist theory, or gender studies. Next. So previous studies. I have some previous studies for this research. First one is a liberal feminist approach to Charles Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper by Alken from 2021. The overview of this is that this study looks at how the story critiques the 19th century norms that confined women to domestic roles. So it focuses on how the protagonist's mental decline is a reaction to her husband's control and the restrictive rescue. The implication of the study is that the analysis shows that the story's relevance in this current discussion about women's autonomy and how patriarchal systems still influence perceptions of mental health. Second one is women entrapment and flight in Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper by Gendeharian and Mazzari from 2016. The implication of the story is that the research examines the theme of entrapment using psychoanalytic theory, highlighting how the protagonist's autonomy reflects a border struggle for women's freedom under patriarchal norms. And the implication of the studies is that it shows how the protagonist's obsession with the wallpaper symbolizes her struggle for autonomy, making the story a critic of societal and psychological constraints. The third one is called Patriarchal Culture and its Effect to the Character in the Yellow Wallpaper by Ummah et al. From 2024. The overview of the study is that this research explores the impact of patriarchal culture on the protagonist of the Yellow Wallpaper. Patriarchal culture in the story limits women's freedom, emphasizes dependence on men, and enforces restrictive gender roles. And the implication of this study is that it shows how patriarchal norms limits women's roles, providing insights into gender's dynamic in the story that makes connections between the story's critique of patriarchy and border gender issues. Next. Fourth one, I have gender, patriarchy, and the economic oppression of women in Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper by Bashir and Mahmoud from 2024. The overview of this study is that it analyzes the Yellow Wallpaper through a feminist lens, focusing on how the protagonist's struggle with postpartum depression and her husband's rescue reflects the gender roles and medical authority of the 19th century. And the implication of the study is that it helps readers understand how 19th century gender roles and medical practices suppressed women. The fifth one is called Perceptions of Women's Mental Health in the Main Character in the short story The Yellow Wallpaper by Wayan et al. From 2024. The overview of this study is that it looks at the mental health of the main character in The Yellow Wallpaper, who suffers from postpartum depression due to confinement and lack of freedom. It draws on Dobby's literary theory and Beauvoir feminist theory to explore the impact of patriarchal control on women's mental health. And the implication of this study is that the findings enhance my understanding of the character's experience, which can complement my focus on the symbols. The sixth one and the last one is Gender Oppression, The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman by Ryobel M. et al. From 2023. The overview of the study is that it employs feminist and psychoanalytic criticism to analyze the yellow wallpaper. It examines characters, themes, and symbols to highlight gender oppression within the story, particularly the dynamics of a dominant like husband and inferior wife, especially from the time from the story, which is the 19th century. The implication of the study is that it aligns on patriarchal oppression by showing how character dynamics and symbolism reflect issues of gender inequality in the story. Next is the theoretical foundation of the story. First is symbolism. Symbolism is the practice of using symbols to represent ideas, concepts, or emotions, etc. It allows for the communication of complex thoughts and feelings through representative imagery or objects. So the symbolism can take many forms, including words, images, colors, and objects. They carry both denotative or literal and connotative or implied meanings. Second one is patriarchal oppression. Patriarchal oppression affects not only women but also society as a whole. It limits the potential of health, the population, stifles creativity and innovation, and perpetuates economic inequality. Patriarchal oppression also refers to a system in which men hold primary power, dominating roles in political, social, and even economic spheres, leading to the subjugation of women and non-binary individuals. The systemic inequality manifests in various forms, including discrimination, violence, and limited access to resources and opportunities to other, excluding men. And patriarchal systems have existed throughout history, often rooted in biological determinism and traditional gender roles. Early societies frequently organized around male dominance with property rights, lineage, and traditional gender roles. Early societies frequently organized around male dominance with property rights, lineage inheritance favoring men, and this historical context sets the foundation for contemporary gender inequalities. Next is the research methodology. Next one is research methodology. This research will use a quantitative research design to investigate the impact of patriarchal oppression on women's resistance as depicted in The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And the quantitative approach allows for the collection and analysis of numerical data, thereby facilitating the examination of relationships between variables related to the themes of patriarchy and women's resistance. And the goal is to measure the representation of symbolism quantitatively and connect it with the concept of patriarchy and women's resistance identified in the text. The design of this research is descriptive correlation, aiming to describe the patterns of patriarchal representation, women's resistance, and the connection between the two through symbolism of the story. Next is that this research will examine elements in the narrative to identify patterns of symbolism relevant to the themes of patriarchy and women's resistance. And the data collected will be analyzed using correlation techniques to examine the relationship between symbolism and indicators of patriarchy as well as women's resistance. To ensure that the data collected can be analyzed quantitatively, data collection instruments are used to request assessments from feminist literary experts regarding to validity, and relevance. So The population in this study includes all narrative elements and symbolism in the yellow wallpaper that are relevant to this research. Next. So as I said before, that the population of the study includes all narrative elements and symbolism in the yellow wallpaper that are relevant to the research. The research samples consist of elements selected using purposive sampling techniques based on research criteria, and the quantitative method used in this research provides a systematic and measurable approach to analyze the representation of symbolism in the yellow wallpaper. Next. Here are the references of the research. Next. So I guess that was all for my presentation of my proposal, that the title is The Impact of Patriarchal Oppression on Women's Resistance in the Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I'm sorry for any misunderstandings and any flaws during this presentation. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.